We all know what is data science, but what the hell is marketing science or marketing data science?
Marketing science is really the practice of using, different scientific methods to make basically smarter marketing decisions. So there's like 5 pillars of marketing science. Experimentation and testing is one of the 5 pillars. I can talk a little bit about that. And then you have this whole concept of attribution. Attribution modeling is going back to that quote I gave, 50% of my marketing dollars are wasted and I don't know which 50%. Attribution really tells you which channels are working, which channels are not, and where are they working. Another pillar, it's a pillar across a lot of data science fields, is machine learning. We're using past data to forecast future trends. And then the 4th pillar is really on what's called brand measurement, which is the long-term impact of marketing, not just short-term. And finally, you have optimization and automation, which is really using insights from all of these other pillars and improving our marketing processes to optimize marketing spending across different constraints. For example,
Our guest today is Agastya Komaraju, Global Head of Product and Science for Growth and Funnel at Amazon. He was previously a Senior Director at Walmart, spent time at Nielsen, and is an expert at marketing science. In this episode, we cover what exactly is marketing science and how is it quietly shaping what we buy, why companies waste millions on ads that don't work, and how data can stop it, how Amazon slashed 90% of marketing spend while still hitting hiring goals, what GenAI means for the future of marketing, from creative to targeting. Whether you're a data nerd, a marketing pro, or just curious about how the world subtly persuades you every day, this is one episode you don't want to miss. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to Data Neighbor in your favorite podcast app and YouTube. Let's dive into our conversation with Agastya.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Neighbors podcast with Stravya and Sean. In today's podcast, though, you have me, Stravya, and Sean chatting with Agastya. He's an award-winning marketing data science leader from Amazon with previous employer like Walmart and Sam's Club. Welcome to the podcast, Agastya.
Thank you so much for
Welcome,
having me.
Agastya.
Awesome.
Excited to have you here.
So glad to have you here, Agastya. So let's dive in. We all know what is data science, but what the hell is marketing science or marketing data science?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I know you guys had Josh Tramer, who I'm a big fan of in one of your episodes.
Yes.
So super
Yeah,
excited
great.
to be here. I think that's I don't know. I think he was here fairly recently. The bar is pretty high. Jumping right in, marketing science. So the world of marketing science is, it's a fairly complex domain, and marketing science is really the practice of using different scientific methods like machine learning, experimentation, or optimization to make basically smarter marketing decisions. Spend where you have to and don't spend where you don't have to drive whatever KPI it is that you're interested in. It's really about taking the guesswork out of marketing and relying on data and evidence-based strategies. I can give you an example. One of my favorite examples is an experiment by Dan Ariely in his book Predictably Irrational, if you read that book. And so the idea is we're all irrational, we all make irrational decisions, but we make these irrational decisions in a way where we can actually predict those irrational decisions and we can actually use them to our advantage. For example, one of the really cool experiments in the book is Ariely found that for an ad for the Economist magazine, there were 3 subscription options. There was an online-only option for $59. There was a print option for $125, and a print and online option also for $125. So quickly, if I were to put those 3 options to you guys, what would you pick? $60 online, $125 print, and also $125 print and online.
I mean, more for the same money. So both, right?
Spot on, right? So he asked the same question to a bunch of his students at the MIT Sloan School, and 84% of them, like you guys did, picked the combo deal, print and online for $125, and 16% of them chose the online-only option. Nobody picked the print option, 0%, right? So if you took that experiment and reran that experiment without option 2, right, which is nobody chose that option, the experimental results should not change. What's fascinating is when he removed the second option and gave it to another set of 100 people, 68% of them actually chose option number 1, which is online only. And 32% of them chose the combo deal, right? So this is what we call in the marketing world a decoy option, which is human beings like to perceive and compare things with something that they can actually compare it with. Online and print are hard to compare, but
Right.
print and print plus online are easier to compare, and I'm getting a little more for the same price. So, most people, even though they don't really care about the print option, chose it just because it was a better deal.
Right.
So think about marketing science as you can run experiments like this and use it to get people to buy more product, add more things to their cart when they're online or when they're walking to the aisles. Can you have some kind of a pricing decision or a promotion where people are adding one more item to their cart? They're renewing their membership, they're renewing their subscription or loyalty program at higher rates than before. So that's really how marketing science is used. This is a classic example, and you can use experiments, machine learning, and data to uncover hidden patterns in consumer behavior and applying these insights to create more effective pricing and product strategies. That is, in a nutshell, what marketing science is about.
Awesome. Wow. So now I know who's responsible for making me buy all those things. I think I knew already, but thank you for explaining that. So, Agastya, now, like before we dive into this marketing science and data science part of this, let's actually take a step back, right, and try to understand like what is marketing, like how do I mean, we all know what marketing is, like when the advertisements and things like that, but what I'd love to know from you, especially with your varied experience in retail and now in Amazon, how do you have some idea about other businesses and other industries? Look, how is marketing used to grow, right, for the companies to grow, to get more user growth and things like that? Would love to understand about the space more.
Yeah. Most large companies, Fortune 500 companies, have dedicated marketing teams to support specific functions. So I have sales. I'm a retailer and I have sales, and I have a marketing team whose primary objective is to maximize sales. So how do I sell product more effectively? How do I brand product more effectively and make sure they're coming to us and then buying more product? That's something that the marketing team does. There is another team that, for example, might focus on a completely different part. So if one team is focused on sales, another team could be focused on renewal. So let's say you're in a renewal or a subscription-based program, and you want to make sure you have the right subscribers or members to actually ultimately make that purchase. So imagine you're running a curated wine subscription service, and people can buy bottles of wine from you at a discounted price. One team is just focused on acquiring the right number of members and subscribers, and another team is making sure they're upselling and buying more bottles of wine. Another team could just be focused on making sure they're renewing their memberships. So marketing campaigns to renew their memberships. And one marketing team could be just focused on branding. Why should people join our wine club? And studies suggest you need to have a short-term and a long-term impact on marketing, because if you're just optimizing for selling more in the short term, your brand value over time goes down and people don't think about your brand as much, and then they go to the competitor. So there's like various facets of marketing.
And also, is marketing the most spent channel for some types of companies, especially in the growth phase and things like that? Would love to know some numbers. Might not be specific, but ballpark.
I would say the most definitely at the very top of the list, right? Top 3 or 4 levers. A lot of companies, again, Fortune 500 companies spend, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing. I've been a part of some companies that have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the past. And as part of Nielsen, I've consulted for several Fortune 500 companies that also spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and they want to make sure they're spending money the right way. One of the famous quotes in the world of marketing is 50% of my marketing dollars are wasted. And I don't know which 50%.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
what with that in mind, in terms of like kind of like such a high percentage of wasted dollars, like what are maybe some of the like outdated marketing strategies or even channels, I don't know, that you just seem to continue to see happen over and over again? You're like, oh, why are you spending money on that?
Yeah, well, strategies, definitely there's several of them that are outdated.
Uh-huh.
Channels, I won't say they're outdated. For example, it's kind of hard to believe that in the world of digital marketing, everything is so personalized. If you go on YouTube, you're seeing ads that are super personalized. You go to Instagram, you're doom scrolling, and you see these ads that are super personalized to you. And I feel like, are you watching me? So that's machine learning and marketing science at play, right? Everything you do is personalized to you. And in a way, it actually helps the customer make sure that they're buying products and watching reels that are relevant to them. The reason I'm giving this answer is because there are some offline channels like radio, direct mail that are still very, very effective.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
What's fascinating is in one of my previous gigs, I actually saw that direct mail was one of the most effective channels in driving incremental sales. I can give you an example. One of the things, and this is publicly available, so I can talk about this. When I was working at Walmart, I was basically on the Sam's Club business. Sam's Club is a competitor to Costco. It's a big box retailer. People pay a membership to get steep discounts on products that they buy, and usually they're buying a lot of it at a time to save on costs. We were sending direct mails to a lot of people back in the day, and direct mail costs money. You're spending a lot of money in postage and making sure you have high quality paper. You want to make sure you're also hitting on the right brand messaging. There is enough pages in there. And we were reaching out to a lot of people who are not responding or not doing anything with it. And that's a lot of paper, economically, environmentally, you want to make sure you're making the right decisions. So there is this whole idea of persuasion modeling, which is you're reaching out to people that are more likely to respond to what you're doing, right? So there are these 4 groups that you think about, which is the lost causes, which is you don't want to reach out to these people. They're never going to respond. They're not shopped in the last 1 year. They're not going to shop in the next 1 year anyway.
Right.
Don't reach out to them. And then you have these sure shots, these suburban families that are always shopping. They shop twice a week. They're buying for their kids. They're buying to throw a party at their house. And they're always shopping. You don't need to waste your money.
Need to market to them. You got them.
And I think one of the outdated strategies is a lot of companies rely on propensity modeling and saying, hey, I'm going to give people who are likely to respond. And so you're wasting a lot of discount, a lot of marketing on these people who are going to shop anyway.
Yep.
And then you have this do not disturb segment, which is taboo to talk about these people. Don't disturb them, because once you do disturb them, you're going to have the opposite effect. For example, I've subscribed to a streaming service to watch an India-Pakistan match now, and I'm not going to look at that again for another year. I don't care about it. And I forgot
Don't
about it.
remind me I'm paying that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many of them.
And I'm on 8 such services, and I forgot about it. And if they market to me and remind me I'm on it, I'm going to go cancel my membership. Yep. So those are the kind of people you don't want to touch. And then ultimately, there's this persuadable segment, the holy grail of marketing, right? You want to go after this thin slice that actually is going to respond to your marketing and is going to give you incremental impact. So you're minimizing your marketing costs, you're maximizing your return on ad spend. In the marketing science world, it's called ROAS, return on ad spend, ROAS, and that's what you want to track to.
Also, to be honest, this is something that's good for the customer too. You don't want to annoy people, and you want to give people something that they want, not something they don't want. So I feel good about getting this ad, not bad about it. And, so it's both good for the customer and good for the company. So that's the best way for the companies to be, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That propensity score matching, that's pretty interesting insight, though. I feel like I've seen that at multiple companies where it's like, yeah, these are the top 10%. That's who we reach out to, spend on, but you don't have to. Like, you should probably be looking at, I don't know, that 70 to 80% or 60 to 70% or something, maybe.
Yeah. And I think the devil is also in the detail is marketing teams tend to look at open rates, click rates. And so when 2 different teams are optimizing for completely different KPIs, that's when you get a lot of this noise. Is they want to reach out to people who are more likely to open an email. But you have these data science teams telling you, like, it doesn't matter whether they open it or not. The KPI of interest, which is sales, you're not moving it. It's not incremental. It would have happened regardless. So it's really, when you want to go after persuasion modeling or what's called incremental response modeling or uplift modeling, these are all interchangeable terms that are used in the industry. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to run experiments, wait for the data to come in, and use those experiments as inputs into your machine learning models to then target these people, because otherwise you don't have the data to actually run these models, and it takes a lot of time. And most marketing teams are interested in, what can I do next week? So it's that striking that right balance is how you can move in that direction.
Can you talk slightly more about the experiments? I know both of us would know, but let's say whoever's watching us today are not aware of the causal, the causal methods we could use. And especially I'd also want to understand what type of causal methods other than experiments that you do for marketing, because there are so many, I don't know, have you worked with these big boarding, near the airport, you have these advertisements that you can't basically understand if someone watched it or not. And these maybe NFL advertisements that people do, how do you know that people watched them and how did that impact? Things like that. Would love to understand causal mechanisms that marketing science uses, because that's entirely different from product data science. And probably that's the reason why there is the difference in terminology, saying marketing science and, data science product.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, a good segue into like what I can think about as there's like 5 pillars of marketing science if you think about it. And experimentation and testing is one of the 5 pillars. So I can talk a little bit about that. And I think one of your other questions is, hey, how do I know something is causal in cases where I can't run randomized control trials all the
Yep.
time? So how do you rely on that a little bit? So yeah, so marketing science, the way I think about it is really, is 5 pillars, right? Which is experimentation and testing. So this involves running randomized control trials. We have a hypothesis, and it's really similar to how scientists across different fields, not just in marketing, conduct experiments. We're testing marketing strategies and creative instead of chemical reactions or something related to
Yep.
biology. And then you have this whole concept of attribution modeling is, hey, I can't run a million experiments, and so can I look at data into the past and attribute incremental impact to different marketing strategies? So this pillar really focuses on identifying which marketing efforts like social media or display are really driving the results that we are getting. We control for seasonality, we control for trend, we control for other marketing conditions, and try to decompose the true incremental value of marketing. Kind of going back to that quote I gave, 50% of my marketing dollars are wasted and I don't know which 50%. Attribution really tells you which channels are working, which channels are not, and where are they working. Like, for example, in LA, I don't need to do any marketing. My brand is very well known. In Dallas, that's not the case. And it's really social media that really helps in Dallas versus in LA, it's something else. Another pillar, it's a pillar across a lot of data science fields, is machine learning. We're using past data to forecast future trends. We're predicting which of our customers are going to churn. This is where I talked about like persuasion modeling, which of your employees is going to churn, which of them are likely to leave. There's a whole field of people analytics. And there's marketing for people analytics as well, predicting which of your members is more likely to redeem an introductory offer. And we talked about persuasion modeling already. And then the fourth pillar is really on what's called brand measurement,
Yep.
which is the long-term impact of marketing, not just short-term, really quantifying and tracking the health and perception of your brand versus looking at your KPIs of interest in the short term. There are a lot of studies that talk about using surveys and focus groups that help establish how marketing is driving long-term impact, and that's something that a lot of companies use as well. And finally, you have optimization and automation, which is really using insights from all of these other pillars and improving our marketing processes to optimize marketing spend across different constraints. For example, one of your constraints could be, I can only spend 70% of my marketing budget from last year. I'm not funded to spend more money this year. There's a cut. Marketing conditions have changed. Or I want to increase my return on ad spend by 30%. So how do you optimize your marketing spend across channels and geographies and products, holding for these constraints, and then really automating a lot of these routine tasks like marketing operations and executing marketing recommendations? Instead of daily updating a file on Google, you build software products that automate these marketing recommendations so marketers don't have to do it on a daily basis. So those are really the 5 pillars of marketing science.
That's awesome. So if you could repeat them, so the 5 pillars of marketing are maybe experimentation's one. The second one's machine learning. I think I missed the second one. This is the third one probably. And there is, maybe you could talk about it before I miss something.
Yeah, experimentation, attribution, machine learning, brand measurement, and optimization. So those are your 5
Awesome.
pillars.
So in the experimentation itself, we have direct A/B experiments, pretty straightforward, and the causal experiments, right? That was one of the questions that probably falls under this category, right? Is that true? Or
That's true.
yeah.
And there is a whole debate on attribution models, and there is endless debate that I've seen between scientists on, is attribution modeling causal? And it can be. It can be, because think about an attribution model. What it primarily does, it controls for a set of factors. So that's what you think about as your control variables. And then you have your treatment variables, which are marketing and price, promotion. Is something featured? Is something displayed? It is causal in that nature that you're trying to control for as many things as you can, but it's not a true causal model in the traditional sense of how causal models are used, but it gives you what you're looking for. So one way to quantify if these are causal models is take the recommendations from the model and run a randomized control trial where you have business as usual, where marketers are doing their own thing in a certain section of your markets, and take these model recommendations from a media mix model or a multi-touch attribution model and deploy them in a certain percent of your market. And then you can really measure the impact of these recommendations, and that is truly causal.
Wow. And now I'm thinking already about all the seasonality stuff and all the things that are going to come like mix with the results here. And we need to be like slightly art and science to understand the actual output and what do we understand from that. That's pretty cool. Like so many questions in like every area of the marketing, the 5 pillars of marketing science you just discussed. So what I'm pretty curious about, lots of terminology and terms here. So let's just try to make it simple, right? So let's say there are advertising, different types of advertising, right? And how do we attribute a person that probably sees an advertisement, probably sees multiple hoardings when they travel, probably to LA, to another place, and then go back to their home in Dallas and buys that product? Like what happens with this user in marketing science?
Yeah, there's a whole body of work on this, right? Which is there are multiple types of attribution modeling. One of them is
Yeah.
called first click. Is you clicked on 10 ads, you clicked on a certain ad, display ad first, so all the credit for that person's conversion goes to the first ad.
First one. Okay.
Yep.
And then there's this whole concept of last touch, which is the opposite, which is everything goes. And then there is something else called basically multi-touch, and then there's equal weighting. All of the channels get equal weighting.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into the science part of it, which is you are looking at the candidate paths, which is all what multi-touch attribution is about, is you have hundreds of, and this is where you need the data. If you don't have the data, it's really you need to build the data before you build these models. Is you have hundreds of thousands of these interactions where candidates or members or they're actually customers are going through these journeys. And you have all these journeys, and you have a lot of these combinations. So member or subscriber A or customer A went through marketing channel 1, 2, 3. Member B went through only 1 and 2. And so what these multi-touch attribution models do is compare enough of these and basically remove one of the candidate journey paths and try to establish what the incremental value of that touch point is. And then they basically attribute overall sales or your KPI of interest into each of these marketing channels and then help you optimize. Hey, these channels are not incremental at all. You can remove them, lose no impact. These channels actually give you 30%. And sometimes there is this whole network effect, which is certain channels drive other channels,
Right.
which is where you have a DAG, right? Which is people look at a TV ad and then they go search for it and they buy. So that's where you need to define for the model what are endogenous and exogenous variables, which is what channels can really drive other channels and what channels cannot drive other channels. So paid search, for example, cannot drive TV. There is a cyclic relationship here. So the network models require you to create what are called DAG charts, directionally acyclic graphs. And so what that means is like it's not cyclical in nature. You define those relationships and you rerun your models and come up with these causal metrics.
So as like a marketing science leader, I'm kind of curious what your approach is in terms of convincing these teams that like, hey, this causal model I drew, because even with just like even experiments, right? There's a lot of uncertainty involved, and especially when you're drawing a DAG, like that requires a lot of intuition and peer review. You can do some correlative stuff, but at the end of the day, like I imagine the kind of insights that come out of this stuff is defining budgets of teams. I'm sure some teams like digital marketing teams, like we did that this year, and the brand teams, no, that was because we did X, Y, and Z. And I don't know all the marketing teams. I'm sure like some event people are like, no, like our big event in Vegas, like that's what did that bumped that. How do you do that more of not the technical stuff, but the getting the understanding from all these different stakeholders and team to buy in and believe the science?
Yeah, that's the hardest part of the job, right? The science is the easy part. The human element of taking science models, deploying them, and convincing our partners that what we're doing is in the long term going to help them do a better job in moving their KPIs of interest is really pivotal. How do I do that? One is proposing small scale experiments. You don't come in, build a model, and propose to overhaul an entire system that exists. There's very little to gain and a whole lot of things that you can lose. Understanding what is the KPI of interest that different teams are tracking to is important. For example, if a brand team is tracking to a brand goal and you go tell them, hey, you're not driving sales, that's not really helpful. You can go to a brand team and then say, you're not really driving brand scores up either. And by the way, here's another scenario 2, where if you do this instead of that, it actually goes up by 5%. And let's go try that in these 4 markets. If you're not okay with those 4 markets, tell us which 4 markets you're okay testing this in, and really getting that buy-in to minimize your impact while you're testing this, negative impact while you're testing it. And then once you have enough data, then it's not a debate. Then it's basically, I have data. And it's really, and that's the right way to do it too, because there's another quote in the world of machine learning, right? Which is like, all models are wrong, some of them are useful. So
I
your
love all
models,
your quotes, Agastya, today.
well, they're not, none of them are my quotes, right? It's just,
I mean, all the quotes that you're quoting.
yeah, it's like, I think that Office episode.
Yeah.
It's really, you have a model that is telling you to do a couple of things, and you know it might be useful. So you should go test that in the real world, collect experimental data. And for example, when in one of our media mix models that we built, the model suggested we were going to reduce spend by about 90%. And when we, it was not 90%. When we ran it, it was around 65%. It doesn't mean that the model is wrong. In real world, you get different data. It's different time periods. Your experiment, your model data is over the last 2 years. Your experimental data is only for a quarter. But that's how you validate it. Is it moving things in the right direction? And as long as it's moving things in the right direction without impacting your KPIs of interest, that helps you be a little more bullish and then run a bigger experiment with 25% of the network and then 50%, and then making that your standard business as usual and saying, hey, this is how we do things going forward, and anything subjective, we have to experiment. It's really building that trust in a stage-wise and sequential manner versus overhauling existing systems.
Gotcha. It's like finding what your stakeholder cares about. Basically, don't give them some metric that they're not, OKR'd on, or even like that they're not trying to move in their team. Give them a recommendation of like, we think you can be more successful if you do X, Y, and Z, and then start small, and even give them preference around like how to start small. Let them tell you, then you can expand from there.
So also probably some previous success stories would help. I've seen that help too. Guys, we've seen similar situation. This is what we've done and this is what we've seen. This is where we can go, probably gets more buy-in as well, trust of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah, spot on, right? So one of the things in my career, we've entered what was called the Association of National Advertisers have this award called the Genius Awards, and they host that on a yearly basis, and they have 4 categories. And this is primarily for marketing science, marketing analytics, in adoption, innovation, growth, and storytelling. And entering awards like this helps you build that trust with your stakeholders too. It's like, hey, this is not something that I've come up with yesterday. It's not something I made up. It's something that's been in the industry for a long period of time. This is the scientific method. And by the way, we won an award in the past using the same thing. And it is peer reviewed by judges across the industry, and it helps baseline your work against some of the best players in the industry. So it's, I recommend and encourage people to enter some of these awards, reputed ones, and it'll help you understand where you are and also give you a lot of ideas. It's a humbling experience. You learn from a lot of your industry peers as well.
I'm just thinking, like, when you're at Nielsen or even maybe you at past companies, are there any like major mistakes you routinely see teams or companies make when they're trying to measure marketing impact?
Yeah, I think it's going off on anecdotal data. A lot of times, senior leadership is very reactive. At the C-suite level is very reactive to anecdotes. People have commented on a certain Facebook page.
And these marketers, they know how to tell stories too, so the anecdotes are good.
There's another quote, one more coming up. Marketers are really good at marketing their own campaigns.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
So they will tell, and they're really good, and that's the job they're supposed to do. And sometimes when they're optimizing for KPI that's not incrementality, then basically there is this pushback against even experimentation in 5% of the network. There's going to be a lot of caution. There is a lot of doomsday prophecies that will be thrown out to say, hey, if you do this, we're going to miss all our goals, right? So there's going to be a lot of that. So I think companies at the leadership level should be open to taking some of those risks. We've always done it a certain way. We don't have data to know what happens when you don't do it. And when you do that, then you might find that, and we've been wrong several times. Like when we proposed an experiment, the experiment didn't, 80% of experiments actually fail, right? And we talk about the big ones that actually worked. You run a campaign, you measure it, or sometimes you propose actually stopping a campaign, you stop the campaign, and actually you do lose out on subscriptions, you do lose out on membership, you do lose out on sales. It hurts you, but that's an investment in the data. It's like, you know what happens when you don't do certain things, and that actually feeds your machine learning models and helps them get better over time. So that's a big mistake that I've seen companies do. We've always done it a certain way, and really going off on anecdotal data.
Yeah, we had a podcast episode recently where we were talking about product data science, but just one of the big things for me with experiments is even when they're failures, like that's when you're succeeding, you're not learning anything. Like it's just like, oh, we knew that was going to happen and it happened and you're not learning. It's like the failures is what's teaching you. And that's now going to give you some kind of context and base to have to form your next hypothesis. Otherwise, it is just, I don't know, guessing from a blank slate without it being informed. So I think everyone and listening to this channel is probably pro experimentation. So these aren't the people we have to convince.
Also, Agastya, you mentioned Genius Awards, and I'd love to dive into that use case of yours that you got your team and the work that you've done as part of both Amazon and Sam's Club, if I remember right. Both of them got you awards. Before we jumped into that, I want to ask you, what are different channels of marketing, right? We discussed what the pillars of marketing science, but what are different channels of marketing? Probably this is another basic question about marketing. What I can think of are like, I don't know, YouTube advertisements, TV advertisements, radio, direct mail, email marketing, right? And what else? Google, like
Display
keywords,
ads.
display ads, app store. Like, what are the biggest marketing channels and where do people spend a lot of money?
Oh, yeah. One more thing to tag onto it so we can make this question very difficult for you. Just throw in as much information as possible. No, but and then as you go through the channels, like what are the ones that are really lend themselves to marketing science, and what are the ones that are more in that ambiguous space you mentioned, where you're like, I don't know what half is not getting us the lift.
Yeah, let's get Agastya into trouble.
Yeah, well, I think you've summarized pretty much most of the channels where people spend big money, right? So you traditionally categorize into two categories: online and offline, right? Offline is your traditional TV, radio ads, but even TV now is turning more into a programmatic play, right? People know exactly what people are watching. Personalized, hyper-personalized ads are coming in. Companies can track what you're watching and serve you personalized ads. You have obviously, everything on social media. And I think you asked like, hey, which channels are effective? So if you're a startup or if you're running brand campaigns, a lot of times that's influencer marketing, Instagram, social
That's the
media.
new thing, influencer marketing. Like probably 10 years ago, I don't think we had influencer marketing, right?
We did not. And,
Yep,
and influencer marketing really sells. If you have a product and you're trying to sell a certain lifestyle, if you're a fan of Shark Tank, and you guys should be, because I think you said Nextdoor, the founders of Nextdoor was, I think, a shark.
Yes, he was. Yes, Nirav Talia. Yeah, he was.
Kevin O'Leary is my favorite shark. Yeah, so there's a lot of channels to your point. I've seen actually direct mail work really well, especially for certain, for example, if you're trying to remind people to renew their membership. Sending them a renewal notice sometimes works really well again, but then you got to go back and say, hey, there is
So
a
is
lot
that
of people.
offline? Sorry to bring, that's offline, right? Direct mail, and what else is offline?
Yeah, direct mail, radio, TV. I think you talked about like these big, it's called out of home, these big banners that people drive by. And
Yes.
you have these big banners. So those are called out of home. Yeah, those are traditional. There's flyers. People do flyers on your door.
Oh,
So
wow.
those are all offline
Yes.
channels. And then online, the big ones are Google search, paid search is a big one.
Yep.
And then there's this whole organic search is, and that's where SEO comes in. You want to make sure there's a very, very cool eBay study that I really like sharing with people. eBay was basically spending a lot of money on paid search. So when people go search for a specific product and, eBay comes on top, and they also search for eBay. They say, hey, eBay watch. And then you get this link at the top.
Yes.
They click on it and they go purchase. And eBay marketers were basically spelling doom when you stop doing that. And so this statistician, professor, academic comes in and basically, proposes an experiment. They stop marketing. And then what happens is basically right after the paid ad, you have the organic ad. And so literally nothing happens. So you see paid search clicks go down, organic search go up exactly by the same percentage. Nothing really happens. So no incremental impact, right? So that's
So it's
one digital play.
basically that's a great point. So what you're trying to say is that I see this all the time, by the way, not just eBay. I go in, I actually have a brand search. Probably I'll go say, I don't know, Amazon certain thing, or I can't think of an exact specific thing. But what you're trying to say is there's a sponsored advertisement right at the top of the search page, and right below it, the Google search itself thinks this is like you need to go to this page because this is the right place for you to go to based on the search term. Then why are you paying for Google for the same thing if Google's anyway giving you as a top number one ranked result, right? So
Spot
probably
on.
that's what you're talking about. And they probably removed the eBay sponsored ad and they anyway are ranked number one. So they go there to the top probably, right?
Yeah, spot on, right? So the terms used in the industry for these are branded and non-branded keywords, or
Makes
branded
sense.
search, non-branded search. What that means is, and then there's a little bit of like defense offense play, how you do this, right? So for example, you own a company and you want to bid for that company, even though you know you're still going to be ranked, you want to bid, and you pay very little. If it's very relevant, Google charges you a lot less. So people search for, let's say you're making coffee mugs, Shravia's coffee mugs, right? And people are Googling that, Google shows that anyway, and you're paying very little. You're paying only a cent. Whereas
okay,
if
makes
people
sense.
are searching for Shravia's coffee mugs, but then you want Shane's coffee mugs
Mhm.
to show up, right? So Shane, you have to pay a lot of money to Google because it's not
Worth
as
it.
relevant. So it goes through a whole bidding process in the back end, and Google, if you win the bid, will put it up at the top. But then to you, a lot of your non-branded search is probably going to be incremental in value, whereas your branded is not going to be that incremental in value, but it's still a defense play. You still want to have some spend there so people still can see you at the top, even though
Yeah.
it's still there. So
Or probably you want to replace the Shane's coffee mugs, right? If Stravia's coffee mug, if people are searching for me, they better see me at the top in the ad too, instead of someone else's coffee mug in the ad. And you
Yeah.
want to take the same space so that no one else takes that ad
Well,
space.
Travis, you just got to go into Google and you just got to keep clicking that sponsored ad of my coffee mug thing until I go bankrupt, spending all these ad dollars. Those things aren't
I know,
cheap. I had a buddy who he was at a bed startup, like mattresses and mechanical beds for a while, and I'd like dial his site in. He'd be like hanging out with me. He's like, "Don't hit that. Those ads are really expensive." And I was like, "Okay." All right. And then like I accidentally hit him sometimes. He's like, "God damn it, that was $2."
That's so awesome. Oh my God. Yeah. This is so, I love this, Agastya. So basically, offline marketing and online marketing, right? And offline is anything that's not related to probably your mobile or laptop that you're on, almost, right?
And it's hard to track. It's really hard to track offline
Offline's the
activity.
hardest to track. Yes. So online is anything with, that you have probably a cookie attached to. Probably who that person is through whatever Google Analytics, I'm sure, has a bunch of data based on who this person signed in. Might not be the exact data, but some sort of non-PII information of the user. So there's some data assigned to online marketing, but for offline, it's still not. So how do you test the offline marketing then? I know DMA testing and a bunch of things, but
Yeah, so the two, so we're now talking about the second pillar, which is attribution marketing. How do you attribute everything to different
you're
channels, right?
right.
So
Yes.
within attribution, there is like two major ways of attributing. One is called multi-touch attribution, or MTA. Another is called a media mix model. Media mix models have been around for 40 plus years. The strength of a media mix model is it measures online and offline together. You think about it like a regression model. It's like a regression model, and it is not at a user level, but it's more aggregated data. So it's at a market level. It could be at a city level. It could be at an MSA level. It could be at a state level. You can run it at different levels of granularity. And so you can run correlations with sales, and you're controlling for seasonality, cyclicality, and you use 2 years of data. So I know during Christmas my sales peak, but that's Christmas. That's a seasonality flag. You have a seasonality flag. You have price reductions happening. You have a lot of promotions happening. Oh, and by the way, I also have a little bit of direct mail going on, and I also have a lot of display going on. And so the model is able to break out and tease out the impact of each of these levers and decompose sales into each of these channels. So if you have a lot of offline data, media mix models are the way to go. And if most of what you have is digital data, and then MTA is the way to go, and if a lot of it is actually to do with real-time optimization of creatives, you have a lot of different messages, and every 15 days there's a lot of variation in your data, and you want to do short-term optimization, MTA is the way to go. So the way I would also think about it is, if you want to think about which channels to spend on, and how much to spend on, and you have a region product level breakdown, MMM is the way to go. And you can have both. Now, within paid search, let's say my model recommends I spend $1 million. That $1 million should be allocated to one of 16 types of creatives. Which of those 16 is usually MTA, and it does real-time optimization. So you can think about both of those things playing with each other instead of choosing one over the other.
Wow. Makes sense why people should hire for marketing science, right? This is awesome. So Agastya would love to jump into the genius awards that you and your team has got. I think you've gotten 2 awards, like Sam's Club one and also an Amazon one. Would love to understand how your work has been in those specific areas and what did the industry see in those projects and the work that you've done that got you there.
Yeah, I think we briefly talked about in the example that I quoted about the Sam's Club experiment. Right? It's the science of persuasion marketing, where we basically did the same thing. Is we were reaching out to all these people who would have responded anyway or sure shots, and we were spending a lot of money at Sam's Club. And when we were able to shift our focus from propensity-based modeling to uplift modeling, we saw over 100% lift, which means we were getting a lot more response and we were spending a lot less. So we were also selling a lot more product. So that kind of won us the award back in 2020. The one around 2024, I can spend a few minutes on that. So that's a very unique, and this is a different category. That was more around analytics adoption. So we basically were able to adopt existing analytics into broad adoption and drive a big impact. The second one is around analytics innovation. And what's really innovative about this approach is a lot of CPG companies, retailers use media mix modeling and marketing science for selling more product, right? For acquiring more members or subscribers. But this application is using media mix models on a daily basis for what's called job marketing. Right. So job marketing is basically labor demand is constrained in the world that we live in today. The resources are limited, and we're talking about all kinds of jobs, not corporate jobs like yours and mine, but for tier one jobs where people are picking, packing, sorting, and shipping product. For example, for your Prime Promise, 2 days. Or 1 day, and Amazon sells like millions of items, and a lot of them are available for delivery within 24 hours. And so you think about Amazon's workforce, you have hundreds of thousands of these workers, and you have to be very precise on where you have them. You 12 people in a rural site in Arkansas, you need to get 12 people there.
Yeah.
So compare that to the traditional approach, which is, let's say you're trying to market to sell Oreo cookies. I have $1 million. I need to bring in $10 million of sales for Oreo cookies in the United States. That's a broad problem. I can sell more in Texas. I can sell less in Chicago. I'm fine with that. I just need to sell $10 million worth of Oreo cookies, right? So my targeting is a lot more broader. I don't care. Whereas here, you need 12 people.
You need specifics, basically, right? So there's micro effects on what needs to be solved for. It needs to be solved a specific favor, specific amount in a specific area versus when you compare it to the bigger. But before you dive in, also, Agastya, I have some context about this problem we've discussed, I think, when we had the previous chat. But I want, Sean and also people who are viewing to understand. So this was a problem that you tackled as part of helping Amazon understand how to get the right amount of labor for the right marketing budget that they use to get this labor, right? Is that true, the context of this problem?
That is correct. So today
Yes.
I'm a part of a team called ITA, Intelligent Talent Acquisitions, which really deals with the problem of getting people at scale with the right skills at the right place at the right time. And I think kind of going back to the problem statement, Amazon originally was an online marketplace for books. A long time ago, it was a startup at one point. But today the company sells everything from books to shipping container houses. It's massive.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that. I mean, I probably didn't try, but that's really cool.
You can get one for your backyard. They're reasonably priced. I'm selling a
Nice.
little bit right there. And you have tens of millions of these items on Amazon that are available for 2 and 3 day shipping. And over 1 million items are also available for same day shipping. So the backbone of that undertaking is Amazon's amazing workforce. And you have to hire a lot of people every year, hundreds of thousands of workers. And I think we talked about the precision of the problem. You got to get people where they are needed. But I think another element on that precision is getting people when they're needed. And a lot of times this labor demand is usually a 2 to 3 week window, a 3-4 week window sometimes, right? Which is, I need to get 40 people in this specific warehouse in Houston, Texas, in the next 3 weeks. And so now, let's say that place has a Costco right next to it, and a Target right next to it, and a Walmart right next to it, and they're all hiring, and there's a shortage of workers. And so in 2022, back when we were solving this problem, Amazon's recruitment marketing efforts, it's called RMS, they were decentralized. And so every market had their own individual recruiting marketing specialist, and they were making the decentralized decisions. So like, hey, I know a lot of cars pass by this banner. I'm going to spend money on this banner. And so decision making was completely decentralized, and that was leading to potential over delivery of applications or under delivery. So for example, you need 12 people, but I got 60 applications, and I'm now looking to hire, let's say, 20 people. And I know this is traditionally a site where it's hard to hire people, so I can't turn them away because it's bad experience. And if I want them again 2 months from now, I might not get them. So there is no
And
standardized.
Agastya, who were making these decisions? These were personnel making the decisions, right? When you say decentralized, this was not science at all. This was purely marketing, the personnel sitting in those locations, making decisions based on what they've seen in the past. I'm sure a lot of historic wisdom that's only in their brains that can't be transferred, right, to the next person who comes in and probably suddenly they leave. And then the area probably suddenly gets into some problem because of this, understanding of how systems work in their area.
That is spot on, right? So these are essentially marketers for jobs, recruiting marketing specialists. And there was a reason why they were making these decisions, right? For all practical purposes, in a silo, they were making the right decisions. This is all they know. This is all the data they've been exposed to. And from a local market standpoint, they were making the right decisions. Hey, I know when I advertise here, I get more applications. And so I'm just going to keep doing it. I think, they're not building some kind of a model in the back end accounting for seasonality. They're not looking at like think about it like the local minima and like the global minima.
Yep.
So it was very decentralized decision making. And so what we ended up doing was the first thing we did was centralize all the decision making to say, hey, instead of everybody making these decisions, let's centralize the whole decision making process and have data driven products make those decisions. Hey, where is there a labor risk, and can you assess that risk and then recommend the ideal amount of marketing, which in the back end was a media mix model. We've talked about it, but then using those media mix models to understand the true incremental impact of marketing. Is it incremental here in this market? If not, stop it. And then that's where you have these hard discussions, is when you stop marketing, there is sometimes but then you wouldn't have filled anyway. So instead of not filling and spending, you're not filling and not spending. So why do you want to bleed from both sides? So really it's really making those decisions, and again kind of going back to that experimental approach, starting with a 5% launch, and then expanding to 25% when you saw those 65% gains. So over 2 years after launching the product, data driven centralized product, which is also basically making science recommendations, we saw a 90% reduction in marketing spend with no impact on our KPI, which means we were hiring the same number of people without having to spend 90% of marketing spend, which was a lot of money.
Absolutely. I mean, we can imagine, Sean, 90% spend for Amazon. We can imagine how many millions of dollars that would be. Probably you can't talk about that specifics, but that's amazing. That's like a true example of what happens when decisions are made in a centralized way, where you have all the historic information and you make sure that you think global, like the global minima versus local minima, and making sure that you take advantage of all the context you have at the centralized place. When you're decentralized, I'm sure there's tons of things that work that have to be decentralized, but at least this part can definitely be, happen at the top level and then can get into the specifics. This is awesome.
Yeah, and you're spot on, right? And the model recommendations won't work for all markets. Are there markets, sites where things are going to be worse off than before? Yes. And so you got to keep a track of those sites and markets and make sure you can manually override those decisions. Yeah. As long as you're doing that to be 5-10% of the network, there are these outliers, you're fine. But I think you want to launch these broad, data-driven, objective recommendations for a vast majority. And again, just to clarify, all opinions expressed on this show are personal and not related to any company. And also the marketing that I'm talking about is specific to the marketing that my team owns. Amazon is a beast. It's really a collection of several different companies, the way I think about it. So there are several teams that actually do marketing, and this doesn't reflect any of the marketing they're doing. This is specifically in the ITA Tier 1 workforce staffing space where we see these changes. Another thing I also want to talk about is marketing is seen as two different things. It's a cost in certain places. In this case, it's a cost, right? You're spending a lot of money to get people, and that's a cost function. In a lot of teams, like in the Sam's Club example that I've quoted, marketing is a sales driver. You're actually trying to grow the top line. It is a cost, but it is actually bringing in top line. Whereas in this team, it's not top line, it's an operational play. You need people so that you pack product, and it's a cost of doing business. So when it's a cost play, a lot of companies are open to bigger cost cuts. For example, I would have an impossible time convincing any marketing team to cut 90% of their marketing spend if it was driving the top line. It's impossible. I've tried, we failed.
Oh my God, I'm already, yes, so darn true. Because that's too much at risk, right? There's just too much at risk. how much ever you test, how much ever you experiment, it's not going to be sufficient enough for them to make a bet for the long term that they would lose, like on the overall, right? Probably, I'm sure there are other ways to get there, but way more incremental and iterative than probably the cost cut marketing that you're talking about.
Yeah. So we talked about constrained optimization. The optimization most top line marketing companies would ask for is, I spent $1 million last year. I'm not going to spend $1 less. Tell me how to get more for the same $1 million. So you're optimizing
Improve my
for
ROAS, right? Is
improve
that
my ROAS,
improve
not
my
reduce my
ROAS?
spend.
Return on ad spend. Wow. That's, yep. I've seen companies where they went from marketing-led growth to PLG, the product-led growth. And this has been the discussion, right? How do you get the same amount of people, the same amount of sales, whatever you want to call, like whatever marketing's driving, to make sure that the product led also gains the same thing. And then the slow transition happens from one to the other and things like that. This is so cool. Thank you so much, Agastya, for getting into this. Now we are almost at the end of the podcast, close to the end. And the last topic that I want to cover, Sean, let me know if you want to cover anything else. What I was thinking to cover with Agastya is, how do you think marketing is going to work with Gen AI, right?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Because we got to do marketing for the show. Got to get that SEO. Did you just say AI a bunch of times? And
I do.
that's our YouTube marketing strategy. Yeah, no, actually, yeah. I think more specifically, how do you think AI is going to help marketing or marketing science? How do you think it's going to make it like more challenging? I mean, I can see one side of the coin where it's like just like copy wise, right? Like ad copy, that becomes very easy. On the other side, now I'm all suspicious about all this ad copy or reviews or something. Is it coming from Gen AI? Another kind of interesting thing I've been thinking about that people talked about is with Google's search generative experience at that top.
Yep.
Are people now scrolling less in Google search and seeing less of those Google ads because they're kind of getting what they need at the top, or maybe it's not relevant because they're not searching for the kind of stuff where there'd be a product involved?
Yeah, and to get more specific, Sean, to the same questions, I want your opinion, Agastya, on the first one. Like, are agents going to come by, not people anymore? This is the thing, right? The agentic world that we'll probably enter, if everything people predicted is going to turn out to be true. It just means that Agastya's agent will be looking at something for Agastya, and if Shravya's agent might have posted about Shravya's coffee mugs that didn't even interact with me, and basically humans are not in the loop at all. It's agents that are in the loop that make decisions for the humans. So how does that work in the world of Gen AI? That's number one. And number two, specifically into Sean's question around how is the whole search, because search, it's definitely showing signs of moving into something entirely different. Perplexity is one platform that's currently making search entirely different. It's literally our Google search top experience made 100% without any like ads and relevance come in. Would love to understand from your point of view what will happen to the Google search. So two questions.
Yeah, well, this is a hard question. I think the reason I say that is I've made certain predictions back in 2019 and they've not come true at all. So it's I would like to believe we're a little further off from basically the AI doomsday that's coming up.
I mean, not everyone would call it a doomsday. A lot of people call it like, I don't know, the future, or where a lot of people just get time to go spend with their loved ones and agents do all their work, Just kidding.
All of it has to end with ASI. We're talking about AGI, and then
Yes.
ASI is a super intelligence that's where Skynet kicks in, the Terminators walk over and kill all humanity. Right? Those are the scenarios.
We go to Mars. We go to Mars. Isn't that the plan?
I think only the billionaires go to Mars. We're like the new robot slave things to the AI.
No, Sean,
Like
I'm
the Matrix.
thinking.
Yeah.
No,
we're doing a lot of like we're like you've seen the Matrix, right? It's like that situation. We're just in
the battery.
Yeah,
but Sean,
batteries.
I'm thinking with Data Neighbor and this podcast, we're going to be the next billionaires. And like, what? Come on.
I was going to make a joke.
Sean doesn't believe it. Sean just laughed. That's not going to happen. But okay, Agastya, go ahead.
Yes, in 2019, so there's the auto ML world kicked off a long time ago, right? Now, even back in like 1997, 1998, SAS, it's a tool that we all learned when we were in school, which is no longer, it's not as popular as it is now, but they have this auto ML, which is like, hey, you have your data and it'll run like 10 different types of models and come up with, here are your KPIs, go look at them, here are your metrics, interpret them, and then go launch models. That's been around for a while. It's been around since like 1988 or so. If I'm not mistaken, I might be. More recently, in 2018, 2019, AutoML started really taking off. You don't need to code. There's the three big players in the area, which is Dataiku, I think was one of them, H2O, driverless AI, DataRobo, which is you just upload data, connect it from your, Azure cluster or Redshift, wherever it is, put it there, and, based on the type of problem you're solving, it'll run 100 different models, take the top 50, run a bunch of blenders, take the top 10, and it'll give you a champion model. You can look at the fit metrics, F2 score, R square, MAPE. You can actually come up with a blender model and then put that in production and track model efficiency over time. And then the whole loop was already there. And so the prediction at the time was like, hey, we don't need to code as much anymore. You don't need these big Python, PyTorch, Spark experts.
Right.
You have these point and click tools available now. So, some of the predictions we made at the time was more data scientists would actually marketing scientists were going to go and be in the world of marketing directly, right? Which is you have a marketer who's clicking a bunch of buttons and deploying machine learning models on the go. It did not happen. Now I think there is a bigger chance of that happening with Gen AI. A significant chunk of marketing team, about 25-30% of marketing teams, focus on creative development, copywriting, messaging, shooting those reels, making sure you hire the right actors, like Dwayne Jock. I should have Dwayne the Rock Johnson for one of my Christmas commercials. So those kind of decisions, I think, will fundamentally shift. So that'll actually make marketing teams smaller and a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
The creative part is going to be first affected.
Did you just say smaller?
More efficient, right?
Yeah, you want to focus on more efficient, but
more efficient.
the smaller part is about losing jobs to AI. But no.
I think it'll create more of like marketing AI jobs, and that's the same that's going to happen on the other side of the aisle as well. I think you talked about agents.
Yeah.
One marketing scientist can do a lot more than like 5 people as they have more agents, right? So you can get a lot more done. So the team size will also go down there, is my hypothesis, but also it'll create more jobs. It'll create more jobs in other areas, data-driven areas. And that's where you go focus on. I think the consulting
It goes back to your point of like, hey, I'm not going to cut my budget, but I want higher return on my investment.
So because you're working on a lot of those constraints, I think marketing science is still gonna still survive just because media mix models have been around for 40 years. There is a big part of there's a big science component to this, but also a big art component to this. And that's how you combine the two things together. So that human element of consulting, I think, is going to stay for a long period of time. So short-term prediction, 2025, 2026, it's going to look just like 2023, 2024. 5 years from now, I think you're going to have more specialized teams doing specialized roles with the help of these LLM agents.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder in a world, right? It'd be great. Maybe you'll have an attribution saying agent attribution, right? It's not a human. And then the attribution says this is a human. And then that's the first decision tree. Was it an agent or a human? And then the other attributions come to play. Like, that'd be great. Maybe that's the world that we are heading into. We never know. But yeah, I think those are all of my questions.
One question we just usually end on is, what do you think's the most underrated skill of, could be a marketing scientist, could just be like a marketing professional that someone trying to get into the career or just progress in their current career should invest in?
I think storytelling is, I think, it's a critical skill that I've seen differentiate, like given two scientists holding everything else constant, right? Which is they have the right kind of skills. They're both really good experts in machine learning. I think taking the learnings from the model and applying it to so what scenarios and converting them to actionable outcomes is a big differentiator. And I think that's where storytelling, believing in experimentation, and all of that really comes together. And I think students will be really well served. They invest, time on some of your case competitions, right? I think a lot of students have some kind of a case competition, which most people do for like, hey, I have a credit. It's a 1 credit course. I'm going to do it for that reason. But I think taking that seriously and also actively seeking out some case competitions outside of your program in the industry and participating in a couple of them will actually give you the right skills that you need to be very successful in your first job.
Awesome. I love that. We actually have an entire podcast with Josh Stammer on storytelling and how communication is very important, how Josh Stammer himself had made StartQuest, the biggest podcast, one of the biggest YouTube channels. And Yeah, we'll have the link, guys. Go check it out. This is awesome. I think we are at the end of the podcast. Thank you so much, Agastya, for joining us. I had a lot of fun. I'm sure Sean did too.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I love hearing more about the marketing side because Sravya does more growth, I think, than I do. But I'm always on the product side, and I'm always like, what the hell? What is ROA? What is MQL? Like, it's like totally different metrics. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But
It's
it's really insightful, and I love how you broke it down by the different kind of pillars, and then also by different channels. Thanks for the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And this is going on my resume. Josh Tramer and I were on the same podcast. We're at the same level. No. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I did not believe I had 1 hour's worth of content to share, but this was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Agastya. It was great having you on the podcast. And everyone, please let us know how you like this podcast. Please come, like, subscribe, and comment. And we'd love to know from you what did you like from this podcast and what other things would you want from Data Neighbors. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.